India's latest dogfight, 27th of February 2019, where a MiG-21 took down an F-16 in an air battle that unfolded post the Balakot strikes. Find out what happened. Hello, welcome back to my channel. This is Aadi Achint. Today's story is about the latest air-to-air dogfight that the Indian Air Force engaged in on the 27th of February 2019 post the Balakot strikes, when the Pakistani Air Force tried in futility to target Indian installations close to the line of control. Following the Pakistani Air Force's try, the two air forces engaged in a battle in the air that was not fought since the year 1971. The Pakistanis tried really hard to target some Indian aircraft so that they can go back and save face in their country. A little background about this story. So on the 26th of February, the Indian Air Force targeted camps of Jaish-e-Mohammed in Balakot, Muzaffarabad as well as Chakoti. I've made a separate video on this, do check it out, as to how that entire story unfolded and how the Indian Air Force dodged the Pakistani air defense into thinking that the attack was somewhere else. It is highly likely that the Pakistan Air Force was going to respond, and the Indian side was quite as well ready for it. It is also known that this response would have been entrusted to units based at Sargodha, Rafiki or Peshawar. Planning spearheaded by the Combat Commander School, and the lead execution would be done by the F-16 squadrons stationed in Pakistan. A 10 o'clock time over target would be chosen, to my mind, hoping the fact that there was a window of opportunity at the time where the combat air patrols as well as the AWACS change over from one aircraft to the other because of fuel. The Pakistanis of course had their minds on the Sukhoi 30 and the Mirage 2000 as well as the MiG-29, who could provide for a stiff resistance in terms of what they wanted to do. The entire air combat zone to depict this engagement is a frontage extending from about Jammu in the south to Rajouri in the northwest, approximately about 90 to 100 kilometers as the crow flies, and a depth of about 100 kilometers, considering that the AWACS from both the sides would have been flying at that distance from the battle zone. Now let's talk about what the Pakistani Air Force brought to the table on that day. Pakistani Air Force used 3 strike groups for this mission on the 27th of February. 4 JF-17s that took off from the area of Muzaffarabad flew towards the Srinagar sector. 12 aircraft, 4 F-16s carrying laser-guided bombs, 4 JF-17s in an air defense role, and 4 Mirage 3s carrying standoff weapons from the Islamabad area went towards Poonch, Rajouri and Naushera sector. This entire formation would comprise the main battle group that the Pakistanis wanted to use, and I would term it as the central sector for the battle. 8 other aircraft, which were 4 F-16s as well as 4 Mirage 5s, approached the southern sector towards Jammu area, followed by the Swedish Saab 2000. The 4 F-16s mentioned in this southern sector that I was talking about were mainly tasked to do fighter sweeps and of course protect the Mirage 5s that were carrying standoff weapons as well. So the Pakistanis fielded about 24 aircraft in total for this air battle that is going to unfold. There were 2 Saab 2000s AWACS systems positioned somewhere between Sargodha and Sialkot sector, and the second one positioned around Islamabad to make sure that the capital was covered and the area around the battle zone could also be provided for support by this aircraft. So at about 9 hours and 45 minutes on the morning of the 27th of February, the Indian fighter controllers smelled a rat when they noticed that the Pakistani airspace was slow and steady, starting to get cleared up post about 9 o'clock in the morning. They also noticed a Pakistan Airlines flight that was supposed to land in Skardu, which was made to do a complete U-turn and go back to its original destination. The fighter controllers were of course sitting in a secure room somewhere in Punjab, picking up the movement of the Pakistani Air Force on the other side. Keeping a close watch on the situation, the Indian fighter controllers noticed about 24, that is 24 Pakistani fighters taking off from various different locations within Pakistan in a short span of 15 minutes. Given the overlapping coverage that the Indian radars can provide, the Indian fighter controllers could see a considerable distance inside Pakistan. It can be construed that the Indian Air Force became aware of the Pakistan strike package from the very beginning of them starting to take off. Amongst the fighter controllers in Punjab was an exceptional woman officer, Squadron Leader Minty Agarwal, who displayed exceptional presence of mind and composure as she realized this entire battle situation was unfolding. She got onto her console and started firing instructions towards the Indian Air Force aircraft in various areas. She was one of them who took lead of this entire situation and has been recognized rightly so for her efforts. One thing that she was able to do was to keep in mind the usage of F-16s by the Pakistani Air Force. You see, the F-16s or any other aircraft for that matter has a certain capability and a combat range. It is very important for the fighter controllers to understand those combat range to effectively move or vector the Indian aircraft into the direction of battle. At about 9:54 in the morning, 6 Indian Air Force MiG-21 Bisons took off from Srinagar and Avantipur and headed towards the battle zone. The fighter controllers also alerted 2 Sukhoi 30s who were on combat air patrol in that area. They also alerted 2 Mirage 2000s who were doing a similar combat air patrol in the northern sector. Let's come to the battle zone. The first engagement took somewhere in the southern part of the battle zone with 2 Mirage 2000s intercepting a large package of about 8 aircraft, 4 of them JF-17 Thunders and 4 of them Mirage 3s. They were picked up very effectively by the Indian Air Force AWACS, the upgraded and the latest Mirage 2000s, armed with the very latest Mica missiles, which are beyond visual range anti-aircraft missiles, would have scared the daylights out of the Pakistanis. As soon as, of course, they realized what was happening and they were already lit up by the Mirages, they dumped their bombs as soon as they could and literally got out of the battle zone. The Pakistani Air Force communication being intercepted by the Indians shows the fact that the Pakistanis were very wary of 2 big factors. One, the capabilities of the Sukhoi 30 and of course the capabilities of the upgraded Mirage 2000s. Meanwhile, there were 8 F-16s as I mentioned to you earlier in this entire strike package. 4 of them decided to literally zoom up in the air at about 40,000 feet and went supersonic. These were 4 aircraft that had anti-aircraft capabilities, and there were 4 others that were flying at about 10 or 15,000 feet carrying laser-guided bombs. They were the ones that were supposed to target the areas of Nowshera and the brigade headquarters, which is located very close by. They were targeting an ammunition dump, the brigade headquarters as I just mentioned, and other facilities of the Indian Armed Forces in that sector. Now, in the central sector and the northern side, the battle actually began between 2 Sukhoi 30s, MKIs of the Indian Air Force, and 8 F-16s that were flying around, as I mentioned to you earlier. Indian Air Force sources have actually said that the Pakistanis were looking hard to shoot down a Sukhoi 30, putting them on an advantage because Sukhoi 30 is one of the most upgraded and advanced aircraft that the Indian Air Force has. The Indian Air Force also carries a large inventory of these aircraft, and shooting down one of them would give them a propaganda coup that they would keep rattling around the world for the next time to come. This was a dance happening between the Sukhois and the F-16s at beyond visual range. The Pakistanis tried desperately to lock on and sustain a lock on long enough on a Sukhoi 30 so that they could fire the AMRAAM missiles. The Sukhois were successfully able to evade any such locks that the Pakistanis tried to do. The latest revelations actually state that the Pakistanis fired 7 AMRAAMs on that particular day. Now the AMRAAMs are supposed to be the American best of the best air-to-air missile. 5 of them incidentally were shot at by the Pakistanis on 2 Sukhois. None of them even coming close to the Sukhois due to the evasive maneuvers and the smart tactics that were employed by the Indian pilots. Out of 7, 5 were fired at the Sukhoi, 2 were fired at MiG-21s, the story about which is going to unfold in a short time. Now, after doing a little research on the Pakistani air-to-air tactics, it comes to light that what the Pakistanis wanted to do in their desperate attempt to shoot down a Sukhoi 30, while at the same time keeping the Sukhoi 30 a little far away from the 3 to 4 Pakistani F-16s flying at a lower level. The Pakistanis, of course, fired their AMRAAMs, 5 of them at the Sukhois, at the maximum possible range, which shows their desperation or probably even lack of knowledge of that system. Any understanding of air warfare will tell you that the probability of hitting a target at the maximum possible range, which is known as Dmax, is as minimum as nothing. The Pakistani Air Force F-16's efforts to fire AMRAAMs at the Sukhoi 30 were nothing more than a desperate attempt to fire a shot in the dark and hope for the best. One question that will come to all of our minds, and it did to mine as well, that why didn't the Indian Sukhois fire their missiles? They are much more advanced and much more capable than the Pakistanis F-16s. Was it the fact that the Sukhois were not able to get their systems online? That's not the point. The point was they were trying to do 2 things. One, They had to outmaneuver all the AMRAAMs that were fired at them by the Pakistanis and position themselves for high probability kill shots. Well, the Indian Air Force pilots are not trained to fire shots in the dark. They are trained to get the right solution and get the target in the first shot. By the time the Sukhois evaded all their missiles that were fired at them and got into position for a beyond visual range shot, the Pakistanis realized what was happening, turned turtle and ran back like rats into their territory. Now, as I told you earlier, MiG-21 Bisons that was scrambled from the ORP from Srinagar and Avantipur, they took off and covered the area of about 200 kilometers at about 10 to 12 minutes at very high speeds of about 1000 plus kilometers an hour. The lead bison in this formation was flown by Wing Commander Abhinandan Vartaman, who would have arrived just on the scene when the low-level F-16s that were flying at about 10-15,000 feet just entered the Indian border. The F-16 that were trying to position themselves on an attack on the Indian brigade headquarters would have been cautioned by the AWACS and the other guys that were flying around in the region. The F-16s got desperate, literally dropped their laser guided bombs without putting any guidance solutions or anything like that into wherever they could and tried turning back. The F-16s at that time would have also got in their ears the signals that they were being targeted by surface-to-air missiles of the air defense systems of India. The F-16s tried to get back after including about a kilometer or two into Indian territory and dumping their bombs. The MiG-21 pair led by Wing Commander Abhinandan Vartaman, who was known as Alpha 1, and his wingman Alpha 2 moved across to tackle the other F-16s which were now climbing to 25,000 feet. At about 10 hours and 20 minutes, Wing Commander Abhinandan Vartaman of the Indian Air Force crossed into Pakistan occupied territory somewhere around the Nowshera sector while flying a MiG-21 of the 51st Squadron, was in hot pursuit of a Pakistani F-16 climbing out of about 20,000 feet. Abhinandan gave a call to the fighter controllers and informed them that he has a visual lock and is going to go a little closer to the F-16 to try and get a better lock solution and lock him down. Just a moment later that he informed the fighter controllers that he has a proper solution and is going to go after that and shoot him down. The missile locked onto the target using its infrared homing head and Abhinandan fired the missile. The second Abhinandan fired that missile, it is a fire and forget solution. He turned his aircraft around and started heading at super high speeds towards the line of control. At about 45 odd seconds after the launch of his R-73 missiles and about at a range of about 7 kilometers inside Pakistani occupied territory, his MiG-21 was hit by an AMRAAM fired by an F-16. Let me tell you this, Abhinandan would have realized the fact that there is an aircraft targeting him, but notwithstanding his own safety, he still went behind and completed the mission that he was on. Abhinandan ejected from his stricken aircraft and parachuted to safety at about a range of about 4 kilometers from the line of control near a small village called Horan Kotla. He was brutally attacked by the civilians in that area and dramatically handed over to the Pakistani army.
What is your number? Who are you? Okay. Wing Commander Abhinandan, 27981. 27981. 2. Wing Commander Abhinandan.
Now a little speculation. Observers in that area saw his parachute dangling around and descending for over about 12 minutes. That actually tells you that he was at a very high altitude when his aircraft got hit and he had to eject. Of course, what the above actually tells you, this entire battle that I've described to you, tells you that the Indian Air Force had a complete picture of the evolving and the dynamic air battle situation that was unfolding on that day. There are a few journalists that have tried to spin this around, saying that the Indian Air Force's capabilities have slipped over. They were not fully in control of that situation. Well, to them I just say one thing. The Pakistanis came in with 24 aircraft. I have described to you what the Indian strength was. It was 2 Mirage 2000s, 2 Sukhoi 30s and 6 MiG-21s, out of which basically 2 went into battle. I don't know whether our journalists actually learn mathematics, but to any layman with half a brain would realize that the Indian Air Force in terms of its numbers on that day was inferior. But it is never the numbers or the machine that carries into a battle. It is always the man behind the machine that makes a difference. Abhinandan's whole capture ordeal has been seen by all of us, and it was a very sad incident the way the Pakistanis actually handled him. The way he was beaten up, was tortured by the Pakistani military as reported by him when he came back. You know, there are reports that are stating that he was kept in a room with bright lights, loud music, not given time to sleep even. He was made to record videos wherein one can clearly see that the Pakistanis have cut and pasted various parts of that video just to create a propaganda. One thing that I'd like to mention where Abhinandan's grit and courage actually came out. No matter what the situation was, how much he was bleeding, when asked specific questions about his missions, he actually said, "That is something I will not be able to tell you."
You hail from which place in India?
Am I supposed to tell you this, Major? I'm sorry.
Which aircraft you were flying?
I'm sorry, Major. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I'm sure you found the wreckage.
Knowing the fact that he might not be coming out of there soon, he still had the courage to stand up to those Pakistanis and tell them to lay off. Another very funny incident that came out where Abhinandan actually showed a mirror to the Pakistani establishment who claim that the Pakistani army is a very professional service and does not use any militancy and any other non-state actors for its jobs. Now, to my mind, in this video, what you will be able to see is a complete below-the-belt remark made by Abhinandan.
So, Wing Commander,
Yes, sir.
what are your views about Pak Army?
Captain, I hold the Pak Army in very high regard, and I was just hoping that there would be a Pak Army officer who comes in this way. Because ultimately, I know that the Pakistani army is also of soldiers. That is why, Captain, the first question that I asked you was, are you from the regular army?
Okay.
While traveling in this vehicle, blindfolded, he coolly explained and asked the military officer taking him, "Are you from the regular army?" If you actually think about it, it's a very courageous statement to make in the situation that he was in at that time. There are those, of course, who ask for proofs for every damn thing that happens in this country. Analysis of the electronic emissions that were given out by that aircraft on that day and the AWACS as well as the radio transcripts indicated that the F-16s in this area were directly in front of Abhinandan's aircraft as reported by him. The images obtained by the Indian Air Force Airborne Warning and Control System aircraft show the tracks of the Pakistani fighters engaged in this battle. It suddenly shows one of the Pakistani fighters disappearing from the screen, clearly stating the fact that he was shot down. Of course, there is a huge confusion about the tweets being put out by the Pakistanis with regard to the capture of one pilot, two pilots, two aircraft shot down, three aircraft shot down, and so on and so forth. They're crazy, and trust me, to give any importance to what they are putting out in the public domain is something which is an act in futility. Evidence that the F-16s were operating, which the Pakistanis very clearly deny, were exposed by the further remains of the Pakistani AMRAAMs that were found in the Nowshera sector. One thing is for certain, that the AMRAAMs can only be fired from an F-16. It cannot be fired from their so-called JF-17 Thunders. What exactly happened to the Pakistani pilots is unknown, and this is something that the Pakistanis will never come out and admit in the open. In all probability, they beat the hell out of their own pilots, and one of them reportedly died in one of their command hospitals close to that area. The Indian Armed Forces had planned to hit back and hit back hard in case the Pakistanis would have even come close to what they were targeting to. But as the events of the day folded out and Abhinandan was in their captivity, I believe both of the sides would have decided to de-escalate the situation, as if nothing else, this would have opened out into an all-out war. One thing I'd like to say, although making a long video here, is the fact that all these are just a study which is being done by me, compiling efforts made by several air veterans and experts to try and explain what exactly happened on that day. The real battle situation may be completely and vastly different from what I understand, or anybody else for that matter. Till the time the Indian Air Force does not come out and give the entire picture, the reality would elude all of us. I may be 100% right in what I've just told you, but one may never know till the time the details do come out. Thank you for watching this video. May I request you, please do subscribe to my channel, share my videos with your friends. Of course, yes, as I say it in all my videos, do share a thought for the soldiers standing in the battle lines today, in the land, sea and the air, on both the eastern sector as well as the western, once a day, every day. Jai Hind!